Today we are going to tackle a really simple project, a sewing project, and these are my permanent dish towels, or my permanent paper towels. And the way I do these is I use a cotton on one side and terry cloth on the inside. Terry cloth is really absorbent, and that's why I use it that way. And I've got them hung right here at my sink, and I have the clean ones on one hook. That way I know they are fresh and ready to go. As soon as I use one, I hang it up here while it's wet to dry, and when it gets dry, I toss it in the laundry. So we're gonna learn today how to make these. Okay, just a few basic things about sewing. If you're using a sewing machine for the first time or you're still in beginner stages, I'm going to show you how to thread this sewing machine. Now, most of them are very similar in threading process. And so you just put your spool of thread and get a good polyester thread. A lot of times when you're having problems with threads breaking and jamming, it's because you have an inferior thread. So you see this little bar right up here. I'm going to pass it through that. And then there's a little metal piece right here. The thread has to go under that metal piece. And then it's going to go down into this track and back up. And see, there's a little diagram there. Now, this is very important. If you can see it, there's a little metal hook right in there that's going up and down. This thread has to go to the right side of that metal hook, hook into the back of it, and back down like that. And then you're going to be able to thread it. Now, always take scissors and snip the end of your thread off so that it's good and sharp, and it'll make it much easier for you to thread into the needle. So you just pass it through the eye of the needle and pull it towards the back like that. Now pull it out a little ways so that you can have plenty of thread there. Okay. Next step is to put a bobbin in. And I'm using white thread today, so I'm going to use a white bobbin. Let me see if I can find the end of it. Okay, so there's the thread off of the bobbin. Now, most sewing machines now, and even for the past 15 years, will have a drop-in bobbin design. So you need to make sure and drop this bobbin in to where the thread comes off the left side of the bobbin, like that. Then there's a tiny little metal hook in there, and it goes in that hook and out of the cavity. Then you put your bobbin cover on, just like that. All right, I think we're ready to sew. Now this is one of the computerized machines, and so it's got lots of different stitches on it, and it's just touch right here, and you just touch whatever number stitch you want. I'm using a straight stitch, so it's on 0. And my stitch length, which means the length of each stitch that's made, is 2.5, and that's a pretty tight stitch. So now we've got our paper towels, or our permanent towels or dishcloths. I've got a terry cloth side and a cotton side. Now there is a right and wrong side to the terry cloth. It's hard to see sometimes, but there's a nap on the right side. So this is the right side of the terry cloth, and this darker side is the right side of the cotton. So we're going to put right sides together like that. And I'm going to pin it. So I will pin it at the top 2 corners. Now we're going to leave a 6-inch space right in the middle up here on the top so that we can turn it right side out when we get done. And instead of stitching all the way down and leaving 6 inches in the corner. It works out better if you can leave it in the center. So that 6 inches, I'm going to start on the other side of it about right there. Now this machine has a function called needle position down. And so I'm going to press that so that every time it stops sewing, the needle is going to be in the fabric. That'll make it much easier for me to pivot. So we're going to sew about a 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to sew to the corner to about a 1/4 inch from the corner. Take your pins out, don't sew over your pins, and then pivot it like that. Then we're going to sew down the long side all the way down to about a 1/4 inch from the end. And see that needle's staying down. Now we're just going to sew down about 4 inches so we can leave that hole in the middle on the top. And just sew right off of it like that. And that's fine. Now, to finish these edges so that it doesn't ravel out, I have a serger machine that I can serge it with, or I can set it on a zigzag on this machine and zigzag that whole seam all the way around to keep it from raveling. So I'm going to do this first side on the zigzag. Now on my machine, zigzag is number 3, so I'm going to put in 3, and I'm going to make it a number 5 in width. So we'll start right where we started when we started sewing. And you'll have to turn the wheel to get your needle up. Now I hope you can see that the machine is zigzagging back and forth, and I'm letting it just catch the edge of the fabric as it zigzags. And it's hard to tell with this white thread, but that just finished that seam right there. So now it's not going to ravel. Now I'm going to show you how the serger works to finish the seam. So remember, this is the seam right up here that we finished with the zigzag. So now I'm going to show you the serger sews a line of stitches straight down, but it also sews back and forth on the edge and cuts off the excess fabric all at one time. Let me show you how that goes. See that? Okay, I have all of my seams finished now, except I still have this little hole right here that I left to turn it with. So what we're going to do now is turn it inside out. And if you have big corners on the corners right here, if it sticks out way out, you might want to trim that off a little bit so that it's going to be easier to make it lay flat. Okay, so now we'll turn this right side out. And there are all kinds of tools made for getting those corners out, but I just use a pencil that hasn't been sharpened yet, because the sharper instrument you use, the more chance you're going to go through your fabric. So let's get all those corners turned out. Sometimes you can just do it with your fingers and you don't need anything else. Now this one right here, I'll just use my pencil and show you how that works. Okay, now there is our dishcloth, but we've still got to close this part right here. So I'm going to take it to the ironing board and I'm going to iron all these seams down flat, and then I'll show you what we do next. Okay, I've ironed it down good and flat, and I've ironed in the part that we're going to close up right there where we turned it right side out. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but I've made an X from one corner to the other on both corners, and I'm going to sew an X in there to keep this from separating like this. It'll start to lose its shape if you don't make some kind of seam in the inner part of it. So we're going to do that now, and I'm just going to do just a kind of an 1/8 of an inch seam all the way around the whole thing. Now I've got to change my stitch back to 0 so that I have a straight stitch. And then we're just going to sew all the way around all 4 sides. And that will close up this hole right here as we do it. So now that I'm at this last corner, I'm going to sew diagonally across where I made that chalk mark. And the other way. Now, I didn't get close enough to the end where it closed up this part that was open, so I'm going to go back and sew that end. And I'm going to go in a little bit farther this time. And there is our washcloth. Now I will put a buttonhole in the center about 1 inch down so that I can hang it with my other ones. But that's all there is to it. And we may have to do the buttonhole at a different time, but I'll show you how to do that also.